Okay, in the next example, it shows a model of the software testing process. Okay, first should conduct the design. After the requirement, we have to design the test cases. For designing the test cases, you have to conduct many test cases. Then prepare for the test data. Different kinds of a test data has to be conducted. After giving the different cases of the test data, then run the program with the given data, test data. Then the test results are compared with the test cases, or each test results are compared with the test cases. Then it has to, test cases gives the test reports. It has to verify and validate. The test cases report with the test reports. We will get the report in the form of whether the system is working properly or not. Next is in stages of testing. We have each test cases with come across with the different stages, right? The first one is in development testing, second one is in release testing, and third one is in user testing. First we'll start with the development testing. The development testing is nothing but the system is tested during the, you have to identify the errors and defects. Development testing, where it is tested during the development to discover the errors and defects. Then release testing, a separate testing team tests a complete version of the system before it is released for a user. Before releasing any software, it has been tested for a team of members. They have to test for complete version of the system. Then whether it's working properly, then it is released to the users. Then user testing, user has to check for the system, then whether it's working in the existing environment, whichever the platform they are used, either any of the platform they can use in the program. Next is in development of, first we'll have a, in detail we'll go for a development of testing. The development testing, it includes all activities to be carried out by a group of people developing the system. We are dividing this development of testing into three different types. The first one is in unit testing, second one is in component testing, and third one is in system testing. First we'll start with the unit testing. Unit means what? We are dividing the whole system into separate module, is known as a unit testing. It can be tell it as where the program is in a units or object classes, or tested separately. Each module has been tested separately, then it is working properly for the functionality of a objects or a methods. Next is in component testing, where individual units are integrated to create a composite components. Component testing should be focused on some of the components interfaces. If you have used any interfaces in the program, we need to focus on those interfaces. Any graphical user interfaces it is interacting with, or the pop-up menu has been created, we need to identify that. Then the last one is in system testing. It's mainly concentrate on all the components that is integrated with the all the modules, they are combined together, that is known as a integrated testing or the system testing. The system is tested as a whole, the complete, the system has been checking. It's focused on the components of a interaction. Next, in detail we are discussing the unit testing. It's a individual, it's a test is conducted on the each module or a individual in the components in isolation. It identifies in defects in the testing process. Units may be, it has been identified like a different units with any software products. It may be a individual functions or a methods within an object, or it can be any object oriented program, object classes with several attributes and methods. Then the composite components, it's defined with the interfaces used to access their functionality. Object class testing. Next is in the exercise the objects in the all possible status. It has to be identified with the each possible status. Then for the unit testing, inheritance. One property acquire the objects of another property, or one property has acquires a property of a parent class to a subclasses. The parent class to a child classes. It makes more difficult to design object classes. Test for the information to be tested that is not a localized. Just we have a example for a weather station object interface. It holds a identifier. Within the identifier we have different interfaces. Just like the first interface, we take an example for report weather, then report for the status, then the power save instruments, then we have remote control commands where it has to identify the levels of the forecast, then reconfigure the commands, with reconfigure the same system with the commands has been given, then restart. How to restart? We should restart with the instrument. Then after getting all the data, you should shut down with the instrument. Next, it has to represented in terms of a steps. Need to define the test cases for a report weather, calibrate, test, and as well as startup and shutdown. Using the state model to identify a sequence of test transition to be tested and event of sequences to be cross this transition, we need to identify in terms of a sequences for the state transitions. For example, it goes in the same steps like a shutdown, then running, again it has to be go for the next state with the shutdown. Then next is in configuring, running, then testing to be done, then transmitting, then running. Then after running, you should collecting, then run, then summarize, then transmitting, again run the software. Automated testing. The name itself indicated the test has been conducted automatically. Whenever possible, unit testing should be automated to conduct for each module can run separately without a manual invention or intervention. In automated unit testing, you test for a automation framework such as a JUnit. One example has been given with the JUnit to write and run the program test cases. Any Java unit has been given here to write and run the program test. Then unit testing, it's provide a generic test classes, that is a general classes to extend to create a specific test cases. They can run for all the tests that you have implemented for the report through some graphical user interfaces on the success, otherwise for the test. Then automated, which are all the automated test components. The first is as a setup part, second one is a call part, the third one is an assertion part. First we'll start with the setup. If you want to organize or set up if you want to deliver any lecture, first you need to set up for online classes. Then like the same way we have to set up part, we should initialize the system with the test case, namely with the inputs and the expected outputs. If you are perform any program has to be executed, you will give the inputs, then we have to expect the same output whichever we need depending on the program. And next is in call part. You can call the object or a method or the interfaces to be tested. Next is an assertion part, is to compare the result call within the expected result. Then it evaluates the test has been successful or it false. How the unit test is most effective? It should be shown that the test cases it has to used as a for any expected input and for the expected output. We are testing for what is supposed to do. Then defects in the components, any defects in the components that should be revealed by or by the different test cases. Okay, this leads to the two types of unit test case. The first one is should the reflect for the normal operation of a program and should show how the components works as we expect. The second one should be based on testing experience where the common problem arise. It should be why, because it's any common problem arise. It could be of any abnormal inputs to check for whether it's properly processed, or we have any crash in the or do not crash the components. We need to check with do not crash with the component. The testing strategies. We have different strategy for a test cases. First we have the test has to be divided or the partition to identify a group of inputs that have a common characteristics and should be processed in the same way. In the sense, we have choose some test cases for each groups, whether it's working properly or not. It has to based on some of the guideline based testing. Okay, how it has to go for one step after another, where you use a test guidelines to choose for a test cases. So the guidelines are reflect on the, mainly it's reflect on the what are the earlier or the previous experience for the kinds of errors, different kinds of error programs that often makes when developing the components. Next is in partition testing. Partition means dividing with the each separate or the each module. First is in you are taking the set of inputs and output the results. It's a fall into a different classes where all member classes are related. It can be any example of a program in if performing in the same program addition, subtraction, multiplication with the same inputs, we have to relate with the inputs for the different cases. Each of these classes with the equivalence partition. You should divide with the equivalence. It should be divided equally, where the program behaves in an equivalent way for each class member. Then test cases should be chosen from each partition. Just we have to consider this example, how the input and output. In the input, we are dividing with the equal partition. We are dividing into equal partition fed into the system, and in the output also we are expecting the possible output with the equal partition. It is identify which in the input we have a equivalence partition has been made, which are all with the correct equivalence partition has been executed, remaining are not executed because that is not a equalized partition. Just we are come across the any existing number within a general number system. We have it's in the table it's given less than 4. That means we have a less than 4 means 3 you are chosen. Then between 4 and 10, they are chosen the number 7. Then up to 10, then more than 10 we have a number 11. That is a equivalence partition has been made in between a 4 to 10. Then the same thing has to be given for any number which is less than 10,000 and between 10,000 and 9,999,000 and more than the 9,99,000. Next is in guidelines has to be executed in sequence. It has to be executed one after the another to test software with a sequence which are only a single value. It has to be test one after another with the use of sequence of a different sizes in a different test cases. We have a different sizes in a different test cases. In the previous example 0 to that is 1 to 4 we have a 4 numbers, then 4 to 7 we have a 3 numbers, then more than a 7, right? And like that, it's a use of sequences of a different sizes in a different tests. So the test is middle and the last element of the sequence are accessed. Test with the sequence of with the 0